This episode is brought to you by Blueprint Health. Blueprint Health is a measurement-based care platform for mental health providers. You can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprinthealth. And also, this episode is brought to you by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com, the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers in private practice. They're who I use in my practice. Check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Hello, I'm Gordon Brewer, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, where we explore the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello everyone, I'm Gordon Brewer, and this is session number 226 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Welcome, and glad you found us, and glad you're here for this particular episode. I'm really looking forward to you getting to know my guest today, Morgan Graves. And Morgan is one of those great therapists that is in private practice in Raleigh, North Carolina. And really enjoyed my conversation with Morgan about her transition from really agency work and working as a school counselor and going into private practice as a mental health provider. And I think you're going to learn a lot and be inspired by my conversation with Morgan. She is it was just a delight to get to know, and so looking forward to you hearing from her. Before we get to my conversation with Morgan, I'd love for you to find out more about our webinars, our free webinars that we have available through the Practice of Therapy. And you can find out more about that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/webinars and see some of the things that we're offering there. Also, if you'll go over and check out our cool resources, we're constantly adding to the resources that we have. We have both some paid courses and also free resources that you can get through the website there. So be sure and check it out. You can just go to practiceoftherapy.com and just check out everything that we have there. I'd love for you to come over and explore what we've got there. So also, before we get to my conversation with Morgan, I'd love for you to hear more about our sponsors, Blueprint Health. They are an evidence-based practice platform, measurement-based practice platform for mental health providers, and also TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. They are the leading electronic health record system in this mental health field for private practices. So before we get to my conversation with Morgan, here's more about our sponsors.
As your practice grows, the systems and processes you have in place will keep your practice running smoothly. That is why it is important to have an electronic health record system that is specific to mental health providers. TherapyNotes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. They are who Gordon uses in his practice. And did I mention that they are one of the top-rated EHRs for mental health private practices? Their support is also second to none. Be sure to check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Be sure to use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free. Running a great behavioral health practice is hard. Payers are demanding more measurable outcomes, therapists are harder than ever to hire and retain, and clients expect a digitally enabled care experience. Introducing Blueprint, the all-in-one measurement-based care platform that helps behavioral health providers grow top-line practice revenue, increase clinician satisfaction, and deliver more effective care. Blueprint's intuitive platform administers, scores, and charts hundreds of symptom rating scales to give clinicians deeper insights into how clients are progressing. And you may be eligible to earn additional reimbursement for each administered outcome measure. Get your first month a blueprint free by going to practiceoftherapy.com/blueprinthealth.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm so happy for you to get to know Morgan Graves. Hi, Morgan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Yes. And so Morgan and I connected online and really started learning a little bit about her and thought she would be just a fun person for you to hear from and just hear about her private practice journey. So, Morgan, as I start with most everyone, tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
I went to grad school at North Carolina Central University, and I got a dual degree in clinical mental health counseling as well as school counseling. At the time, it was my dream to be a school counselor. That's all I wanted to do. One of the professors presented to me the opportunity to extend my degree and just get that dual licensure. And she really pushed it and it made sense. And so I decided to go ahead on that dual track because I'm like, yes, learning, more about mental health will help me be a better school counselor. And then I started my school counseling career in 2016, and those summer months started to get tough. And so I'm like, okay, I want to use both of my degrees. Let me, see what's going on in this mental health world. And I was a little bit nervous because at that time, I felt like I was kind of removed from what I learned within the mental health field because I was in the world of school counseling at that time. So I was a little bit scared. But nonetheless, I sent out my resume and still didn't hear anything. And then I received an emailed response. And the young lady expressed to me that she wasn't hiring any therapists, but she had an office that I could rent out. And everyone in the suite were independent contractors and, they kind of ran their own private practice. And that scared me because, that wasn't a part of the plan. It's like, wait a minute, that means I'm going to have to do a lot extra. And so I was scared.
Sure. Yeah.
But I talked to some friends and they're like, well, either way, you're going to have resources. You have a supervisor and, you have mentors. So you have people, you can use your resources. And I'm like, I don't know. So I decided to take a risk because I really needed the money for the summer.
Yes.
So I took that risk for myself. And 2 weeks later, I had my first client.
Wow.
And then about 2 months in, I had a full part-time caseload that would sustain me for the summer.
Right.
And so I'm like, ooh, I think I'm liking this. This feels kind of good. The freedom of it all, it felt good. And so transitioning back into the school years were kind of hard because, you have to go back to answering to someone. And, even if you don't necessarily completely agree, there's still policy and procedure that you must follow. And so then fast forward, here comes the pandemic.
Right.
And I have a mother who has MS and she's wheelchair bound. And before the pandemic, we had home care, but the pandemic happened and we lost our home care. So that meant that my sister and I were responsible for taking care of my mom. The school was not able to accommodate my needs. Short. And so I started resourcing again. And I landed on, once again, betting on myself. And so I decided to resign from my position February of 2020.
Wow.
And I went full time with my private practice. So here I am now, at a place where I'm looking to grow and expand because I cannot take on any more clients. I don't have the capacity to reach as many clients as I would like to. And, with more people searching for mental health, especially with the different controversies going on, while also dealing with a pandemic, you have an influx in clientele, people of color who are looking for people of color as therapists. And so with that incline, I'm at capacity. So it's a good thing.
Right.
But I'm now at a point where I am transitioning into group practice so that I can reach more clients.
Right. Yeah. An interesting time to jump full time into private practice right at the beginning of the pandemic. And did you go straight telehealth, or how did you handle all of that within your practice?
Right. So I had an office that I still rented out. However, I wasn't utilizing it again because of the difference in dynamics at that point. But with the clientele that I got in, I was able to still maintain having that office, but I was virtual. So I had the option, I could work from home, or if I still wanted to hold my virtual session in office, I could do that also.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's and I think what you have experienced, which has been like a lot of us, is that the pandemic, the silver lining of the pandemic is just that we started filling up in our practices. I mean, I think the stigma around mental health was kind of, people were talking about that and saying, I'm struggling with this too. And I think so a lot of people started seeking out counseling and therapy. And so, yeah, I think that phenomenon is pretty universal for most of us in this field, I think. Yeah.
The pandemic has challenged a lot of us. And I believe that in some ways, with the things that people are experiencing, it's made it hard not to reconsider therapy if you haven't considered it before, because we're dealing with a lot.
Yes.
And, if you haven't been taught how to manage, what do you do at this point? And so people are searching for answers. They, want to understand themselves a little bit better. And they want a healthier version of themselves.
Right. Yeah. It's, the other thing that I think is, really, you're right. I'm sorry. I had two thoughts at once, and so my mind
happens to me all the time.
Yeah. So, just I think with all that's going on in the world, I think with, certainly with all of the stuff around George Floyd's death, and I can only imagine what it's like for you as a Black woman and being in the mental health field and dealing not only with what other folks are dealing with, but also dealing with your own stuff. And so it really has created a place where the need for mental health services is just, we need it now more than ever. And then, even now with all that's happening in the Ukraine and all of that kind of stuff, it's just, it's a really strange time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what would you say? Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying it's hard also for therapists who are, within the helping profession, we have to almost remind ourselves to, hey, remember, take care of yourself also, because you need it. In order to take care of someone else, you have to take care of yourself first. You've got to put your mask on first.
Right. Yeah. So that just brings up a great question for me. One of the things that I've shared on this podcast is that I'm also dealing with, caring for a wife that's disabled. And so you shared with, having to take care of your mother and all of that sort of thing. What are you finding is your kind of go-to around self-care?
So externally, like massages, I run. And at this point, running is not only for my physical health, but also sometimes that's the only time that I really have like peace of mind where my mind is not thinking about one thing or another. It's just, I'm in the moment, I'm present. It's almost kind of like meditation for me. It's my mindfulness time.
Yes.
So I make sure I get my runs in. I laugh. I have a good time. I connect with other people. I love massages. But also I make lists. I try to keep organized. And that includes my mind. And so if I have a thought or if I have an idea, I make sure I'm writing it down. I prepare for my next day the night before. That way I'm not waking up thinking, okay, what do I have to do for the day? It's already thought about, planned. I can get that out of the way. And I've become very good with my boundaries.
Yeah. That's an important piece. And I love that. Yeah, you're right. When we get busy, learning how to manage our time well is essential. I know with my planner, I couldn't function without it because that's what keeps me on track and that sort of thing. And I'm pretty good most of the time, but there are those weeks, where you just kind of things fall apart, but you just regroup and you get back on track, as I like to say. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as a therapist, making sure that you have a therapist. Right now, I'm in a transition of finding a new therapist. So that's really been something that's been my priority. But yes, like making sure that I'm talking and, sometimes the sessions that I have with my clients, give me that little that I need for the day or the lesson that I need from the day. So I learn from those lessons and it's a reminder to myself of some things.
Right. Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think all of us need to have our own therapist. And that's been my experience too, is that in many ways it's, I guess the technical term is transference, but there are a lot of times when we're working with clients and we see in them some of the same struggles we have ourselves. And we think, okay, what I'm telling them is almost like talking to myself.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's great. So I know you've been in practice really full-time practice, relatively short period of time. Not that there's any of that, but what would you say are the biggest things that you've learned, and what would you want people to know about what you've learned along the way?
Don't give up. Use your resources. So I started off kind of bootstrapping, and then it was like I gained a little bit more confidence and then was reminded, hey, you have people, reach out to people. And then there were a wide range of podcasts that, gave information. And so utilizing those things. And I guess I would say I started to work smarter, not harder. But when you're building a business, it's hard.
Right.
It's no way around that. But definitely utilizing my resources, asking for help when I need it. Those were huge lessons, and taking leaps of faith. betting on yourself. A lot of times there may be like some self-doubt, or, life happens, and, sometimes when life hits, it hits hard. 2019 was kind of like a rough year for me. And so 2020 was also a year that I was kind of bouncing back. So I was going through my own stuff too. So self-care is extremely important to me. And so, yeah, those would be my big tips to upcoming private practice owners.
Yeah. And that, again, that's been my own experience. I think just as I like to call it, is to be persistent and consistent with what you do. And
Absolutely.
And just keep at it. And it's in many ways, I've used this metaphor a lot. I don't know if it's a good metaphor or not, but in many ways, you have to build the airplane as you fly it. And I think as you have done, Morgan, is you stepped out and showed some courage, and you just jumped into it. And, quitting a full-time job and moving into it is a huge step. And it just, I can imagine that you had a lot of knots in your stomach as you did all that.
Absolutely. Yeah. But what I found was when I ran into like my colleagues, we were having the same conversations about how do we start a private practice? We weren't taught that in school. We knew it was a possibility, but no one talks about the business aspect of it. You learn the art of therapy in school, and, that's that. And so after my first year, I kind of reflected on, what were the tips that I wanted from someone else. And so I put a guide together for upcoming private practice owners, self-made, a therapist guide to starting a private practice, which is where I kind of comprise kind of step by step from your why to formalizing your business from start to finish. Some of my tips and tricks, some of my organization charts that I use throughout my process. And then I share some parts of my journey in the guide as well. And it also, of course, emphasizes, thinking about you and taking a second to pause and think about where you are in your journey. How are you doing? What do you need? So that self-care piece of going through your journey also as an entrepreneur.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And how can folks get a hold of that guide?
Absolutely. They can grab a copy on royalphoenixls.com, which is my website. And so they can grab their copy there. Yes. I can also, you can put it in the show notes.
Yes. And that's exactly what we'll do is we'll have those links in the show notes. And I took a look at Morgan's website, and it's a beautiful website. So yeah. Well, Morgan, I want to be respectful of your time. And what are maybe some parting thoughts that you have about just this whole journey that you've been on?
For me or for others?
I would say both.
Okay. Well, I guess it's the same. Keep going. Keep going. Don't give up. And be creative. So think about niching. In my transition, I'm also, really niching. And so that is exciting. And it kind of gives me a rejuvenation of excitement about the field. And so be creative. Don't give up. Bet on yourself. You deserve to be here, and people need you.
Yes. Well, thanks. And I would say ditto to every bit of that. That's been my experience as well. Just, finding your space, finding your niche, and you're going to be a lot happier in the long run.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, Morgan, it's been a delight to have you on the podcast. And again, be sure and check her out at royalphoenixls.com. Take care, Morgan. Well, big thanks to Morgan. I love hearing people's stories and just how they landed where they've landed, as I say at the very beginning of pretty much every podcast. I think that's one of the things that I learned the most from is just hearing about how people get from point A to point B, or how they get to point A to the middle of wherever they are in their journey. And Morgan, again, was just a delight to hear from. And also, I'd love for you to go over and check her out at royalphoenixls.com. She's got a beautiful website there, and so I'd love for you to go over and check that out and find out more about Morgan. And also, I'd love for you to check out the free webinars we've got going on. They are automated webinars, so you get to pick your time and decide when you want to watch the webinar. And we've got 3 great topics right now, and love for you to find out more about that. So go over to practiceoftherapy.com/webinars to find out more about that. And also be sure and check out our sponsors of the podcast, Blueprint Health, and you can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/Blueprint Health. And when you use that link and try them out, you can try them out for 1 month for free. And then our other big sponsor is TherapyNotes, and you can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/TherapyNotes, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, to get 2 months of their services for free to try them out. So be sure and check it out. So thanks again, folks, for joining me for the podcast. Love getting feedback from people and love hearing from you. You can always email me at gordon@practiceoftherapy.com. And also, be sure to follow us wherever you're listening to your podcasts. We're getting more and more downloads all the time. And I think when you follow us and leave us a review or give us a thumbs up or whatever it is whatever it is on your podcatcher, just helps us get out to a larger audience. And thanks again for joining me. So take care, folks. Hope you have a great rest of your week or weekend. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.